Hello everybody, thank you for tuning in with me today. Today starts the series of all the mixed games that you guys will be running into, whether it's stud, stud 8, deuce to 7 triple draw, badoogie, ace to 5 low ball, Omaha, things of that nature. And for all intents and purposes, I'm going to start with deuce to 7 triple draw for a couple different reasons. One of the reasons is because deuce to 7 triple draw happens to be one of my all-time favorite games. Not only that, but there's a lot of tournaments that incorporate deuce to 7 triple draw. For example, throw tournaments versus horse tournaments, where horse tournaments don't have deuce to 7 triple draw, but you're also going to have dealer choice tournaments. 8-game mix tournaments is going to include deuce to 7 triple draw. And it's kind of funny because if you're playing an 8-game mix and you know the lineup, which is stud, stud 8, hold'em limit, no limit hold'em, as well as pot limit Omaha, and then 08, and then it also includes deuce to 7 triple draw. The two most important games of that 8-game mix happens to be deuce to 7 triple draw and pot limit Omaha. And a lot of people underestimate how important deuce to 7 triple draw is in those 8-game mixes. Of course, you guys know I'm coming off of a chop 8-game mix tournament. In order to get to that point, you have to have some key hands, and I'm going to go into some strategies. First of all, if you don't know how to play deuce to 7 triple draw, what it is you get a total of 5 cards dealt to every single player. So this is generally a 6-handed game, and then you get 3 draws to make the best possible low. The best possible low happens to be deuce, 3, 4, 5, 7. Okay, this is what's referred to as the wheel. Now, the reason why I point this out is because people might say, Professor, isn't deuce 3, 4, 5, 6 lower than deuce 3, 4, 5, 7? If you're playing ace to 5 low ball, it is, but in deuce to 7 triple draw, straights and flushes count, and that happens to be a key in a lot of decisions that you might make for starting hands, for example, as well as pitch or hold, okay? And it's a limit style game. And if you think about any type of limit game, particularly in tournament scenarios, in deuce to 7 triple draw, you have an open, which is generally a raise, so 2 bets. And then you can discard and then draw. And then afterwards, so after 1 draw, you have a bet, which is 1 more small bet, okay? And then you have 1 more draw, and then you have 1 big bet, and then 1 more draw, and you have 1 more big bet. So when you look at this betting structure, 2 small bets equals 1 big bet. Every hand is going to cost you, you can estimate, around 3.5 big bets. Now, I know what some of you might be saying, Professor, what's a big bet? What's a big bet? If the blinds, for example, are 100, 200, okay, your bet sizes are going to be 200 on the open and on the first bet, and then they're going to be 400, okay? Now, the reason why that's important is because if somebody decides to raise here or raise here, that can have different implications in what they mean, all right? But generally speaking, when you start off in deuce to 7 triple draw, there's a golden rule that you want to listen to, and it's one of those D-neg principles that I talk about, Daniel Negreanu principles. And that principle is, don't leave home without a deuce. But Professor, what if I have 3, 4, 5, 6? Okay, this is a great question, Johnny in the back. I'm so glad you asked that question. Keep in mind, straights and flushes count in deuce to 7 triple draw. So if you start off with a 6 low, what are you really drawing to? The best hand you can make is an 8, 6, 5 hand. Okay, if you decide to keep all 6 of those cards and then pitch it. In some instances, depending on position, you're better off to get rid of the 6. And I know there's going to be some people on the internet who are going to disagree with that. But keep in mind, I said some situations you're better off getting rid of the 6. It doesn't mean all situations, okay? And this doesn't mean that there aren't times when I'm going to hold and draw to an 86 low. Again, if everybody's drawing 3 cards, I'm going to hold on to the 6, draw to an 86 low. If people are drawing 1 or 2 cards from the word go, I'm going to pitch the 6, particularly if I'm in position, because when you do make a really good low, like an 85 low or, a a 7 low, and make the wheel, you're going to be able to raise on the river and get extra value. And that second bet, that raise on the river when there's no draws, really polarizes your hand because it means you have an incredibly strong hand or you completely whiffed. So, and you want to be able to show your opponents that you are capable at bluffing at the pot with one single bet, even though there's a large amount of bets in there, because if your opponent ended up checking on the river or ended up pairing, they are more likely to fold, okay? So this is how deuce to 7 triple draw works. You get 5 cards in your hand and you draw to the lowest low. Now the types of hands that you should be starting with, okay? You'll hear different terminologies when you're playing deuce to 7 triple draw. You'll hear a pat 9. What that means is the first 5 cards somebody has is a 9 low. So they might have a 9-8, 5-4-3 low, okay? And if you're curious how to factor in the low, you start with the highest card and you go backwards. So this would be a 9-8 low, and instead if they had a 7, that would be a 97 low. But the first golden rule you need to learn in deuce to 7 triple draws, don't leave home without a deuce. That is so important because if you have a deuce, keep in mind there's only 4 deuces in the deck. Same thing, there's 4 3s, 4 4s, 4 5s, 4 6s, and 4 7s in the deck. And the reason why that's important is because if you get a hand, this is what we call snowballing an opponent. If you get dealt something like deuce, 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 doesn't even matter, XX, from the word go, you can hold pat and just continue to raise the pot and bet at the pot and fire at the pot. You can hold pat the whole time, and the reason why is because there's only 1 deuce left in the deck, okay? Now, a couple things that you need to know. If your opponent is capable of folding, then you can snowball them. If they're not capable of folding and they're a calling station, then I would not recommend the snowball strategy if you wake up with a hand like that, okay? So, in cash games, if you start off with a pat 9, or in tournaments, if you start off with a pat 9, those are generally okay to stay and go ahead and raise maximum until the river, and if it checks to you, go ahead and check back or bet for value depending on what kind of opponents you have. Because you're going to have some opponents who are always going to draw for it. When they make it, they're going to bet instead of check raising. And then you're going to have some opponents who are going to draw for it, and if they make it, they're going to check raise you. So in some situations like that, you're better off just checking behind, okay? So if you have a pat 9, even if it's 9-8, and you're against the field, you should go ahead and raise. And you'll see people pitch 2, 2, 2, 1 card, things of that nature. Now, if you get down to the river with a pat 9, that's when you want to check and play for safety. Again, if you're in position, position is so important in deuce to 7 triple draw for 2 reasons. Because the order in which they draw goes to the left of the button. So if you're on the button and you see Bob took 1, Susie took 1, and Henry took 1, and you have a 9, you can sit there and say, I'm going to pat with a pat 9 and let them draw. And if they bet the river, then I'll make a decision whether or not they have the nuts or if they're bluffing, okay? And again, that's going to be player dependent. If you're talking about like good tournament strategy, which is also good cash strategy, generally speaking, the things that you want to open up with are 8XX, or I should say, the things that you want to open up to are 8 with 2 to a wheel, okay? Again, the wheel is going to be 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, and preferably one of those cards happens to be a deuce, okay? If you have an 8, if you're drawing to an 8 low from the word go, and you have 8XX where the other X's are 2 to a wheel, so for example, if you have 8-3 deuce, 8-5-4, even though I don't like 8-5-4 because if you get a 6 and a 7, that's gonna suck. So this is, be a little cautious, but generally speaking, if you have 8 and a deuce and then any other card, these are gonna be raising hands to raise with. You're gonna be ahead of your opponent more times than you're not, okay? I don't know what the statistics are. I'm gonna be frank with you. I didn't pull up any information on statistics with deuce to 7 triple draw. I'm going purely based off of my experience. So I'm sure there's gonna be some people in the comment who are gonna say, this is this percentage, this is this percentage, and this is this percentage. And I understand that, I respect that, I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that with a bunch of other people. I think that's great information. Me, myself though, I don't know what the exact numbers are. I just know based off of playing deuce to seven triple draw for 7 years, or not 7 years, but several years, what you typically want to draw to. So you want to start with an 8 and then 3 to a wheel. Now there are going to be some times, whether you're in a tournament or a cash game, you're in the big blind and you look down at a hand like deuce, jack, jack, queen, 9. Well, you already have a half a bet. Again, if the blinds are 100 and 200 and you have $200 in the pot and Bob over here raised to 400 and somebody else called, you look at the pot odds and right here you're getting a 5-to-1 pot odd ratio. You're calling $200 to win 1,000. And this is the part where even if you have a really shitty hand like this, deuce, jack, jack, queen, 9, you already have 200 in, so you're getting 5-to-1 on your money, pitch in the extra 200 and discard 4 cards. You will pick up a wheel card the majority of the time. And then that allows you to make a determination whether or not you want to continue. But what do you mean, Professor? What do you mean, Professor? Well, for example, if you start off with deuce, jack, jack, 9, somebody raises and you call, now all of a sudden we have $1,200 in the pot. You're generally going to pick up a wheel card. So let's just say you pick up the best wheel card. Say you pick up a 3, and then say the rest is like king, king, ace, okay? And your opponents each drew 2 cards. At this particular point in time, you do have 2 draws left, but now they're going to start costing you a little bit more. You're going to get 1 more cheap draw, okay? And then after that, you're going to get 1 more expensive draw. My general rule is if I start with discarding 4 out of the big blind with a deuce, unless I improve by 2 cards, so if I get a deuce and an 8 and a 5, I'm not going to continue. If I just get a deuce and a 3, unless the other 3 cards somehow pair me, for example, you pitch 4 and you get a 3 and then another 3 and then another deuce and then a king. In those situations, I'm still going to continue because I know my opponents are less likely to draw to those deuces and they're more likely to pair out. So what you have in your hand in deuce to 7 triple draw is so dramatically important because you know your opponents can't draw to it. It's very important for you to know that. And position, position, position. One thing that's common in almost every poker game is position. Position matters, baby. All right, moving right along. So, deuce to 7 triple draw. Again, if you wake up with this, but if you do wake up with 3 cards to an 8 low, like 8-3 deuce or 8-4 deuce, then I'm going to continue because I still only need 1 small bet in order to make a draw. Now don't get me wrong, if fireworks start going off and this guy bets and this guy raises, you know, and say you're 4 ways to the first draw and then the next guy 3 bets, okay, you might pitch it, you might not. That becomes pretty player dependent. Most of the time I'm gonna pitch it, particularly out of position. You really don't wanna come into playing deuce to 7 triple draw out of position too many times. So under the gun, you don't wanna be raising unless you have an 8 with 2 to the low, 2 to a wheel, with a deuce in your hand. And if you do have a 7, like say you have 2, 3, 4, 3 to a wheel, 2, 3, 5, 2, 3, 7, those are all hands that you do want to raise. But if you do get 3 bet, it's more important that you slow down a little bit so you can evaluate your situation because there are going to be times when people are going to be dealt a pat 7, like 7-6 or even 7-5. So, or 7-6-5. So, but yeah, this is basically the strategy to deuce to 7 triple draw. Don't leave home without a deuce is one of the key things. If you're in the big blind, you are getting the right odds a lot of times to draw even up to 4 as long as you have a deuce in your hand. And then the other strategy is going to be snowballing your opponents when you have like all wheel cards, but they're all paired up, like deuce, deuce, 5, 5, 7. And those are hands where you can just pretend like you have a pat 7 and you can just keep firing it because you're blocking all the cards that would be something like a pat 7. And last but not least, when in doubt and it's checked to you and you're on the button, you can always bet. Bluffing in this game is a thing, even though it's a limit. But it's one of the most juiciest games out there because a lot of people will pay you off. And you just have to find out your opponent. Is my opponent a calling station or is he capable of folding? If he's a calling station, I'm gonna lean on him till his legs break, is what I like to say, or I'm gonna lean on him and take him for all that he's worth. When I miss, I'm gonna check back. If they are somebody who is capable of being bluffed, then I'm going to bet into them and bluff them out of a lot of hands. So figure out what your opponents are doing. If you are in a deuce to 7 triple draw tournament, I would encourage you to show up at level 1. Level 1 allows you to figure out what kind of players your opponents are when it doesn't cost you nearly as much as your stack, where later on down the road you can use that information to hopefully bleed your opponents dry and run it up. And as always, everybody, play smart and run like a god.